Let's see. Good morning, folks, and welcome to a crossover episode with Bear Dash. I'm Jasper Sundin, one of your hosts here with Izzy LaRue from Duck Dash, and we're here to break down this Cal-Oregon game. In the words of my good friend Joshua N, let's go. Let's get it going. So both the Ducks and the Bears are coming off, I would describe them as terrible losses, tough losses. The Ducks lost to Oregon State. Cal lost to Stanford. Those are two rivalry games. Really bitter rivalry games. I think some of the better rivalries in college football. And I don't think either team wants to lose another game after that one. Both squads are eager to show up and show out when number 23 Oregon visits Cal, who's 0-3. But Izzy, how does this loss affect Oregon? You were a CFP contender. In a lot of ways, this takes you out of that conversation. What's ahead for Oregon this season after a loss to the Beavers?
Yeah, so we went from college football playoff hopes to even questioning whether we're going to make the Pac-12 championship game now, because now we have to win out the schedule, beat Cal, then beat UW. So this Oregon State loss has really put a dent in Oregon's success this season.
Yeah. I think at the beginning of the season, a lot of us had this game circled as a massive matchup, right? Cal was predicted to finish second in the Pac-12. Oregon was predicted to finish first. We all thought this game was going to be, something to decide the Pac-12 North, and it really isn't. And that's more on Cal, I think, starting 0-3 than Oregon, who in a lot of ways has gotten going. But I also wanted to touch on, I don't think anyone, maybe some Beavers fans out there, our friends on Beaver Dash might dispute this, but I don't think a lot of people saw Oregon losing that game to the Beavers. Why did Oregon lose? How did Oregon lose that one?
Well, it was kind of like a tipping point, that game, because you saw Oregon was 3-0 to begin the season, but there was a lot wrong with the team, even though they were winning games. They barely beat a UCLA team who didn't have their quarterback by 3 points, by field goal. And the only reason they did that was because of this crazy pick six right before halftime by Jordan Happel. He didn't do that. Oregon probably would be 2-2 right now. And then, you've seen the run defense. It's all starting the Stanford game when Austin Jones had 120 rushing yards on Oregon's defense. And you were kind of scratching your head and be like, this is supposed to be one of the best defensive lines in the country. And they didn't get any pressures on the quarterback, no sacks, could not stop the run. And you just kept on going over and over to the next game. And then finally, it all came to a close in that Oregon State game where they choked. It was a choke job by the Ducks.
Absolutely. Hey, the defense, I think, has had a really tough time of it. We're used to, especially in the Mario Cristobal era, of seeing really great Ducks defenses. Justin Herbert was a great quarterback, but you really felt like that Duck defense was a big part of that team last year, and that just has not been it this season, which I think has been a bit surprising. Cal's always been that same type of team where it's really defense first, offense second. I think a lot of people thought that would change with Bill Musgrave coming into the picture, and I don't think it really has as much this season. The Bears defense is, doing an amazing job. But I want to touch on Cal's game against Stanford. That was really disappointing for a lot of reasons. I think namely that the Bears lost it in the last minute on a missed extra point, which is never something you want to see. So I'll use that to segue into a necessary rant about the special teams. Cal lost to Stanford. They've lost a lot of games this season because of special teams. You talked about maybe Oregon's defense being a weak point. For Cal, it's that third unit, which is rare. You don't see teams lose games because of special teams. Cal has lost 2 because of special teams. They've given up 35 points on opponent drives that have started in opponent's territory. 28 of those have come from botched special teams play, and it's really everything. It's muff punts, it's block punts, it's shank punts. Then you have missed field goals, block field goals, holding calls on returns that would be touchdowns. It feels like everything that can go wrong for Cal special teams does go wrong. I said the Bears have given up 28 points because of special teams. They've also missed a potential 18 points because of special teams. That is a massive swing, and it's really hurt the Bears so far this season. But I want to roll it back to the defense if you're okay with that, Oregon's defense at least. How do you feel like the defense has underperformed? Where does that start? Because the Ducks have really, one of the worst defenses in the Pac-12, at least statistically.
It all starts with the defensive line. You look at any defense, any college football team, even in the NFL, it all starts with the D-line. If the D-line can get pressure on the quarterback or on the running backs, making tackles for loss, getting sacks, or even just getting hands in the quarterback's face. The quarterback cannot make those accurate throws. Running backs can't get their run game going, and it makes it easier on the linebackers to where they can get their coverage game going, get those sacks, and then even makes it easier for the DBs, because if you have a quarterback who's not being able to see through a defensive line, easy plays, easy picks, easy deflections, easy pass breakups. So Oregon's D-line, even though it's exactly the same from last year where they were amazing, they averaged about one and a half sacks per game last year, to now where Kayvon Thibodeau only has 1 sack on the season. It's been a real problem, because if they cannot get pressure on these teams' quarterbacks, like you saw Oregon State's QB, Oregon made him look like an all-star out there. Like, he was slinging it. The DBs couldn't do anything. I mean, we only had 1 sack on the game, and then they just cannot stop the run. And if this D-line keeps allowing the opposing offense line to get to this linebackers, it's going to be so much harder to stop anyone, because if you're asking the DBs to make these tackles on these running backs, everyone knows that's not going to happen. Like, you saw what happened. It was almost 220 rushing yards that Oregon gave up to one man in Jamar Jefferson. That's inexcusable, and I hope that Oregon cleans it up. They did something different during this week, maybe more tackling drills, who knows, but they've got to clean that up.
Absolutely. Now, do you think, how do I phrase this? How do you think Oregon bounces back from that loss to Oregon State? Like, does it start with the D-line? I mean, to win this game against Cal, is the D-line going to need to really fix itself? Or do you think there are other sort of chances, other things Oregon can take from that loss against the Beavers to maybe manufacture a better game against the Bears?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because it wasn't just the defense that did bad. It was Tyler Shough. Like, he has to be better. You cannot be a quarterback in the Pac-12 and average a pick a game. Those are Jameis Winston stats. We don't want to hear Jameis Winston stats. He has to do better. He has to learn how to go through his progressions. I mean, they talked about it week 1 against Stanford. Shough said it himself. He said, I need to get better at reading a defense or going through my plays. He has not gotten better at all. You see it. You look at the films. He loves to throw in the middle of the field. I don't understand that. Why would he throw in the middle of the field where there's defenders there? And he throws picks to linebackers too. Like, linebackers are getting picks. Not only DBs, but linebackers are getting these picks. So they need to win the turnover battle, because if they do that, then they won't be giving easy points to the offense, and they'll give their defense more rest time. Because if that defense is out there the whole entire time, they're going to get tired. And it showed, especially against that Oregon State game. That defense got tired because they were on the field way too long. They need to stop giving the ball back to the offense.
Yeah, I think turnover battle is always something critical. I think whenever you ask a football coach what are the keys to the game, that's always something they mention almost automatically. Cal, I think, like you talk about keys to these rivalry losses. The Bears turned it over twice against the Cardinals. They're both critical turnovers. They cost the Bears points. The Cardinals turned both of them into touchdowns. Cal almost had a turnover of their own, but it was called back for a holding penalty. So I think on the Bears side, that's also critical as well. Not so much not giving the ball away, yes, but I mean that's part of the game. It's then creating turnovers. The Bears have not recovered a single fumble this season. I mean, heck, I don't even know if they've created a fumble this season on defense. And that's like, I mean, you can't create turnovers if you're not creating opportunities for them, right? Defensively, the secondary has been better. The Bears have had 3 picks, but those aren't outstanding numbers. And for a unit that usually prides itself on consistently taking the ball away, the Bears haven't quite been there. They had a couple of picks on Gebbia, but I mean, as you said, he's not the greatest quarterback in the world, which I think everyone knows in the Pac-12, even if he's had a couple of good games. And the Bears weren't able to get those same picks on Davis Mills. Maybe Shough is that opportunity for this Cal secondary. We'll talk more about matchups specifically, but the Bears need to create those turnovers, and whether that's the defensive line forcing the ball out of running backs' hands, whether that's the secondary getting in some of those passing lanes, Cal needs more turnovers to win games, especially if the special teams unit continues to play as bad as it has this season. Let's see. With that, I think you and I have both bled into talking about both these teams, and we can start to compare them a little bit. You mentioned Tyler Shough, so let's transition over to the offense. Um, Oregon is first in the Pac-12 in offense. Cal is dead last. I don't think you could come up with more contrasting numbers. You said, though, Tyler Shuck, despite the fact that his stats have been outstanding, is still maybe a work in progress. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What does he need to do better? I know you touched on that, but how does his offense, what are they still doing wrong?
Yeah, so he's an amazing athlete, Tyler Shuck. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a great athlete. You see it in Joe Moorhead's RPO offense. That's why his rushing stats are so high, even his passing stats too, because he loves to throw it down the field. But if you cannot go from your one route to all the way to your third or fourth route, going through those progressions, you're not going to be successful in any conference in collegiate football, and especially in the Pac-12 where we have these defenses that love to have great DB units. He just hasn't done good. Like, he needs to do better. That's why I've been saying maybe throw Anthony Brown for a half, see what he does, because he's actually played a lot in college football at Boston College. He has the stats to prove it. Now, he wasn't the best quarterback. He wasn't a great quarterback, but I feel like why not give him a shot since Shuck he's had 4 picks in 4 games. And not only that, but he just, even sometimes he's not accurate enough too on the deep balls. He'll have a guy going down, let's say Jalen Red or Johnny Johnson. They'll be going down on a slant or go route, and he'll just slightly overthrow them. And you need to be more accurate than that. So progressions and accuracy is what he needs to do.
Yeah. Shuck and Garbers strike me as, in some ways, opposites. I mean, Garbers is not the world's greatest athlete. I mean, Shuck is a great runner. I think he might have more rushing yards than Cal's top rusher, which, I mean, it says maybe more about the Bears and the struggles they've had than Shuck is a great runner. But you're right. Like, he is a definite threat out of the backfield. You can see him on QB draws. You can see him when the play breaks down. He's a guy who can make plays with his legs. Garbers has the same type of mentality maybe, but not the same tools to execute. He doesn't have the same arm. But what Garbers does have is some of that experience. You talked about being able to read through his options, understanding when the pocket's breaking down. He's got excellent pocket awareness, and that's helped him a lot. That's one of the areas in which he's really grown over time. So I think this will be an interesting battle. I mean, Garbers is now entering his 3rd year as a starter, and Shuck's really in his 1st. So they're kind of polar opposites in that way. Something that I think we do have to touch on. Both these teams have, I mean, a lot of talent in the backfield. I think on both sides of the ball, you have multiple options at the running back position. Oregon has some really experienced guys back there. Can you just talk about that running back room for the Beavers or for the Ducks?
Yeah. I love this Oregon running back group because you have 3 guys who are all studs. You have CJ Verdell, who's the main feature back. You have Travis Dye, who likes to catch balls from the outfield. He's a shifty guy, and once he gets open space, he's gone. And you have Cyrus Abibi-Likio, the guy that you'll bring in 3rd and shorts in the red zone, goal line situations, who will punch it in. And each of these guys bring something different to the table, and that's what makes this Oregon's running game so good, because CJ Verdell, he can go for 100 rushing yards a game, but then you also have Travis Dye, who goes for 80 yards. You go for Abibi-Likio, who goes for about 50 yards and has 2 touchdowns. Like, these guys, each of them can go for at least 80 yards per game and at least a touchdown a game. And they've had multiple games where they each gotten a touchdown. So this is the main point of Oregon's offense. That's why this RPO offense is so potent, because especially when you go to the option play, who are you going to tackle? You're going to get Shuck. If you get Shuck, you can just pitch it to Verdell, and then he's going to go off to the races and just bounce it to the outside where the linemen are sealing it off, and you have the receiver blocking the corner for an easy touchdown. So that's why Oregon's been really successful in the run game this year. It's just because this Joe Moorhead offense completely complements it.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I mean, you watch Oregon games, and I mean, any given play just feels like it has so many options because there's so much talent, right? I mean, you got to be wondering as a defender, it's like, geez, like, is Shuck going to hand it off? Is he going to throw it? Is one of the running backs going to leak out for a screen? Is Shuck going to take it himself? I mean, there's so many things to think about, and that makes it so hard to defend against an Oregon offense. And you watch some of these RPOs, and it's just crazy. I mean, at every stage of the play, an Oregon player is just ahead of everyone else. I mean, both it feels like mentally and physically, they're just on top of their game there. I'll talk about Cal's running back room for a second, though, because I feel like it's something that we maybe didn't expect from the Bears, but that's really come to be a definite high point of this season. Garbers has struggled a little bit. The Bears are implementing a new offense under Bill Musgrave, and we've talked about this a lot. But it doesn't feel like he's entirely there. He had a great game against Oregon State, but again, that's just Oregon State. I mean, who doesn't have a great game against Oregon State? What he struggled with against Stanford was, and he said this in an interview after the game, was he just felt the team had been out-schemed. Stanford had been able to cut off a lot of angles. They've been able to take away the sidelines, and it made it difficult for the Bears to attack deep. And you can see that in his numbers after the game. He didn't get over 200 passing yards. He threw for a couple touchdowns, yeah, but he only had one play of over 15 yards through the air. He's still not quite comfortable enough with that scheme to be able to figure out ways to beat teams when they're maybe giving him a hard hand or giving him a hard time. The running backs room, though, has really been amazing. We saw this against Stanford. Damian Moore, who's a true freshman, broke out and had, I think, 121 yards on the ground. Christopher Brown Jr., who we expected to be this team's, leading rusher, the big veteran presence, was injured, but came back into the game when he was needed, ran for a touchdown, had a big first down run late in the game that set up his later touchdown run. And then Marcel Dancy is really your shifty back. He's got quick feet. He's tough to bring down. I can see him giving this Oregon team fits if he can get into that secondary and get into that second gear. And these guys all bring different things to the table. I mean, they're not as much dual threats. I think each of them is sort of decent as a pass catcher, but none of them is going to blow you away in that sense. They're not amazing athletes, but like I said, Dancy is real shifty. Moore is a guy with great vision coming out of the backfield. He's always able to sort of get around people. He sees the holes as they develop, and it pays off. And then Christopher Brown Jr. is, I think, he's our version of Habibi Lekio. He's just, a freight train. The guy is tough to bring down. He has the world's nastiest stiff arm. My jaw hurts just watching him put something in the dirt. He's incredible in that sense. And so I think this is going to be really curious and an important facet of this game. Which of these multiple threat running back rooms can get going the fastest and do the most damage? I think that'll be a massive key point here.
Yeah, I want to ask you something real quick. Because I expected Chase Garbers to have an amazing season, be probably one of the, if not the best quarterback in the Pac-12. I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but is it really because of this new offense that he's been in that his performance is so much different than last year?
I actually wouldn't say his performance has been that different from last year. He was very up and down. He struggled with injuries last season. He had a shoulder injury that sidelined him. He came back and I think had a lower body injury, and it was just he was never quite able to stay on the field. The thing with Garbers has always been he's been able to find ways to win without putting up massive stats. He's had his good games, but with a lot of college quarterbacks, really great college quarterbacks, you see him regularly putting up for over 300 yards. Shuck has done that, and like you said, he's still a work in progress. Garbers has not been that guy, and we expected him to maybe take that step this season, and he hasn't. That I definitely could be due to a new offensive scheme. It's the kind of thing, when it's worked this season, it's worked very well, and when it hasn't, it's left them with really limited options. But it's difficult to say. It's also, there are challenges because of COVID-19. Implementing a new offensive scheme in a shortened offseason is never easy. But it could be that we're just sort of facing it like Garbers is this guy where he's not able to really do amazing things with his arm. He's not able to get out there and beat you in fantastic ways. And I think a lot of Cal fans are hoping that he can turn into that dude, but that hasn't been it this season. And there are a lot of reasons, I think, off the field why that could be the case, but it also could just be that Garbers isn't the world's greatest quarterback. The jury's definitely still out. I think when he's found those guys, especially this season when he's been able to get down the sidelines and find receivers there, and when he has guys that can win with speed on the outside, he succeeds. Mekhi Polk has been a big part of that. Last season in the Red Box Bowl, Garbers was able to nail him, really any time he wanted on these sort of long go routes down the wings. And Polk had over 100 yards receiving. this season against Oregon State, both Polk and Cole Crawford were excellent on the outside. We were able to tear up the Beavers defensive unit. But again, Stanford managed to keep everything in the middle of the field, and it made things incredibly difficult for Garbers. Like, he just wasn't able to make the really fantastic pinpoint throws that you would need to break down that kind of defense. And it hurt the Bears. So, I think Garbers is definitely one of the more experienced quarterbacks in the Pac-12, and it's gotten to the point where he's rarely going to lose you a game. He doesn't throw a ton of picks. I think that's actually the one category where Shuck is far and away ahead of him. Garbers has only thrown a couple of interceptions this season. They haven't always been his fault either. He's smart with the football, but he hasn't shown that, that extra piece of, I don't know, dare I say that extra piece of Aaron Rodgers or that Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not talking about the talent there. I'm just talking about that ability to go out and win you a football. He has not been that dude. My question to you on that, you said Shuck is a work in progress, but do you think he's been that guy? He's shown flashes maybe of that ability to step up and really be the leader of an offense when he needs it?
He's shown flashes of it. You look at the Stanford game, you look at the UCLA game where they kind of had it come together because Oregon, they were barely winning or down at halftime, and Oregon, they weren't really used to that, especially since what happened last season, how they did in the Pac-12. He's been a real leader in that room, and everyone respects him. You go from the receivers to the backs, even the defense. Everyone talks highly of him, even Coach Crispo, and that goes to Anthony Brown too. And I feel like that's why he's been the starter since the beginning, and he probably will be the starter for the rest of the year too, because he has the respect of everyone on that team. And as a quarterback, that's the most important part to have, respect. If you have the respect and you're a leader, all you have to do is just perform now. And he's shown flashes of how he can play. You especially see in the run game, he loves to break the end's ankles. He already has a highlight tape of that in just 4 games. So all he has to do is just be better in the passing game. He's shown flashes of some great throws, but those are also because of the receivers too, like Jalen Redd, Johnny Johnson. They'd had some of the craziest catches in the Pac-12 this season so far. I know Jalen Redd against Stanford, he caught it in between 4 guys. Like, I don't know how you do that. So he just has to be better in those progressions and be more accurate.
Absolutely. This is, I think, critical to any football game. So we'll start to segue into our final segment here. What are some of the key matchups you've seen this one? And then maybe keys to the game if Oregon is going to bounce back. Where are they going to have to succeed? You've mentioned the defensive line. What does Oregon have to do? Where do they have to win on the field to beat the Bears?
Yeah, so Oregon, first of all, they have to win the turnover battle. That's no question. If Oregon doesn't win the turnover battle, it's going to be a tough game. Second of all, they have to get more sacks and tackle for losses, and they have to keep who was your running back again? It was Damon Moore.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, they have to keep him to under 100 yards. If they can keep him to under 100 yards, then we'll know that they've been successful in stopping the run game. And the run game has to have at least 3 touchdowns. Simple as that. Either Shuck has 1, maybe TJ Verdell has 2, but they have to get at least 3 touchdowns because this is going to have to be a statement game for Oregon. If they want to make the Pac-12 championship, they have to prove why they're the best team in the Pac-12 North.
Yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of this is going to revolve around the run game. Both these teams have shown that they have those strong run games. I think Verdell and I have got to be the best running back duo in the conference. I mean, they're absolutely frightening. They ate up the Bears last season. It's got to be something on all Cal football players' minds, every defender's mind going into this game. Another big matchup, though, I see is in the secondary. I mean, Shuck has had a couple of amazing performances, but like you said, that's because he has some amazing receivers. Devon Williams and Jalen Redd have both been fantastic. But Cal has also had a pretty good secondary itself. The Bears, I think, despite maybe a tough start against UCLA, have the second best pass defense in the Pac-12. Cam Bynum is a legitimate, day 1 NFL prospect. He's been playing like it. He's been fantastic, and he's the leader of this defensive backs unit. I'm really curious to see how Bynum and the DBs stack up against specifically Devon Williams. I think he's Oregon's leading receiver, and he's not a guy that I think gets on highlight tapes a ton, but he is big. I think it's the one thing you notice. I mean, 6'5", over 200 pounds. He's a huge guy. And the Bears don't have anyone who matches up with that kind of size. It's Chigozie Anuzium, who's the Bears' second cornerback. He's just 6 foot. He's just under 200 pounds. He's not as big as Williams. And against Stanford, Michael Wilson, who I think was Stanford's sort of his number 2 receiver, he was able to beat the Bears by using his body. He used his size, he used his height to get one in over the Bears when the Cardinal needed it. And that's a matchup I'm looking at, because if the Bears can deal with that physicality, they have a chance to start to shut down Oregon's passing game. But if they can't, it could be a real long afternoon for Cal.
Yeah, it looks like Williams is a bigger target for Shuck to throw interception to, so look out for that.
Absolutely. And then another, I think, key battle that I'm looking at is you spoke about Verdell, you spoke about Dye. Cal has had an extremely thin defensive line this season. I mean, you said Oregon's had problems. Cal has lost starter after starter. Luke Beckett transferred in the offseason. Aaron Maldonado, who's supposed to be the starting nose guard, got injured for the season. And so Cal's extremely thin and weak. I think 2 of the guys who we thought would be starting this season, it's just Brett Johnson and Ziande Johnson, are still on that D-line. The Bears were able to really shut down Stanford last game. The run defense stepped up. I think they held the Cardinal to under 100 rushing yards. But the Cardinal are not the world's greatest rushing team right now. Neither of the guys they have in the backfield are real dynamic threats, and Verdell and Dye certainly are. I think they're 2 of the best running backs in the Pac-12. And so I'm watching Coin Dang. He's the Bears' star inside linebacker. He had a big game against Stanford. He stepped up, and I think he had 14 tackles. He's had a very mediocre season up to this point, and he really turned things around and shut Stanford down. He's going to have an equally big game against Verdell and Dye for Cal to put forward any sort of performance that pretends at a win. Last season, Evan Weaver, who was Cal's starting inside linebacker, did not have that performance, and Oregon won. For the Bears to have a shot at winning, it starts with Coin Dang in the middle, shutting down that run game by bringing guys to the turf. Let's see. I think we have just a bit more time. So I want to ask you actually about Oregon's wide receiver core. I think you guys have a lot of guys who are threats in different ways. What's your take on this wide receiver group? Because there are a lot of different guys that can do a lot of different things. Can you just sort of maybe break it down and give us your preliminary thoughts on some of them?
Yeah, so I love this receiving core because they're so dynamic, and every single one of them are playmakers. I mean, you have Devon Williams, who's a transfer, who's been outstanding the past couple of games, and then you have Jalen Redd, Johnny Johnson. You know what they're going to do every game. They're going to get you first downs. They're going to make big plays. They're going to get touchdowns. And then Micah Pittman, who hasn't been really active, but once he's on the field, he turns it on right away, just like his brother. Really, no one can guard him just because of how fast he is, and his routes are amazing. And when you look at that, these receivers, they like to beat these corners. They take pride in beating corners on their routes because they love the way that they run their routes, and their speed too just complements that. So once Shuck gets more on par, on page with them, like how he has been with Devon Williams, I'm excited to see this matchup just because it's really going to test how much he's progressed throughout these 4 games and what he learned against Oregon State. Because if he can put up 200 plus passing yards on this Cal defense, it shows real growth for him.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting battle. I think another tidbit is Chigozie Anuzium got beaten a lot over the center of the field. And you said that's where Shuck really likes to go. He got beaten a lot on slant routes that would just cut under him. He wasn't quick enough on his feet. He wasn't able to read the route in the way he needed to shut receivers down. So that could be another really critical point. He's going to need to make the changes. And I would guess he's been watching film all week. That's just the kind of secondary unit Cal has. But it's going to need to pay off, again, if the Bears want to have a shot at victory. I said Cal's had a really good secondary, but the Bears have also not faced the world's greatest offenses so far. Oregon is the Pac-12's best offense. So it'll be a real test on Cal's end as well. Is this defense for real? The Bears have had great defenses in the past, but to win this game, that defense is going to need to step up, especially, again, if the special teams cannot do what it needs to do. And what it really should be doing at a basic level, which is, kicking field goals, scoring extra points, not muffing punts. Your standard special team stuff, the things you expect out of that unit. But we are running out of time here, so I do want a prediction for you for this weekend. What's the score going to be? Who's going to walk out of Memorial Stadium a victor?
I'm going to say Oregon 35, Cal 14. They need to make a blowout statement win.
Yeah, I also think Oregon's going to win this game. The Bears have been one of the better 0-3 teams in the country, I'm sure. It feels like they're sort of almost there. They're almost at that point where they can get that win. They've been unfortunate, but I think they're not going to be able to get it here. I think it's going to be a high-scoring one. I see Oregon winning this 40-35. All right, folks, that's all the time we've got today. Thank you for coming out. You can find us at sportspac12.com, where all our columns are published. You can find my work at thedailycal.org, where we'll be covering this weekend's game. And you can find Dash Sports TV on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, as well as dashsports.tv, where all our shows and clips are after the fact. Thank you for being with us. I hope you catch the game, and I hope you had a good time. Take care.